Hi, I'm Bernie Jaroslow, Marketing Manager for Whitmix, and I'd like to welcome you to Quick Takes, which is a Q&A session that we invite industry experts and movers and shakers to provide us with the latest information that we all need during this COVID-19 nightmare. Today we have, I think, one of the most important movers and shakers out there, and that's Bennett Napier, because his job is to make sure that as an industry, we have what we need to be successful. As a lobbyist, he protects our rights and provides critical oversight to those in Washington that make the laws that we have to work within. So Bennett is very qualified to do this. He's a certified association executive and serves as chief staff executive for the NADL and its affiliates like the NBC and the Foundation for Dental Laboratory Technology. Okay, Bennett, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. One thing I will say is that the most important question of all is how are you and your wife and family doing?
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you for the opportunity, and well wishes to the Whitmix family and the Steinbach family for sure, as we all go through this, and we'll come through this together. So personally doing okay. I had some business travel back in March in Europe and had to fly through JFK. So because of the JFK component, they did want me to get tested. So I was in quarantine waiting on the test results. So test results were negative, so that was the good news, which I thought it would be the case, but they didn't want to take any chances because it was all, we all know, especially in parts of the country, this is a major pollen season too, so it's not great timing, pollen season and COVID at the same time. But yeah, doing okay. Everybody on our staff's been good, and we're all trying to work through the new normal in terms of as most of your team working remote and trying to make sure we're able to help dental laboratories across the country and dental laboratory technicians work through the environment that we're all living under.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. So I have some questions for you. We'll try to keep this short, but it's important, I think, that our dental laboratory brethren, understand as much as they can about the crisis, but also listen to what you have to say so that they and their peers are able to handle what's coming in the future. What you say is our new normal, what will be our new normal in a few weeks, months, we don't know yet, but certainly it's not gonna be over tomorrow. So the first question I have is, I know that this has been published by LMT and probably other publications, but how many labs do you think have closed now, at least, of course, temporarily? Do you have an idea?
Sure, Bernie. If you share a screen, but LMT is a survey, and we did as well. And it's good news, bad news. The data is pretty much the same. So I was talking with Kelly Carr with LMT yesterday. So just this number is obviously going to continue to change. We'll kind of get more data, and LMT will as well. So this gives you a snapshot. Has your dental laboratory taken any of the following steps since March 16th, 2020? So you can see about 45% have done furloughs. Then we have another 25% have laid off employees, and then a little bit over 18% have done a combination of layoffs and furloughs, and a little over 10% have done something else. And that the other effectively, most of the respondents there is where they effectively had maybe paid time off, if you will. People had unused vacation, trying to utilize that as the laboratories closed. So I mean, it went, I guess I'd say that week of March 13th or so, that's when we started to see furloughs and layoffs. People were kind of taking some proactive measures, not knowing how quickly the shoe would drop. And then basically that next week was really where we saw it pick up a speed, in the sense that if they hadn't done some of those measures, then a whole bunch more labs had done that the following week. And so I'd say for the vast majority of labs out there, regardless of size, they're basically operating with a skeleton crew just to do, if nothing else, just, communication, customer service with any calls that might be coming in, or the very few cases that might be coming in, from different clients. And, but
Yeah.
I would share kind of the next component of that, as a visual, is, just in terms of production. And I'll kind of scroll to that. So, obviously each state has different executive orders as it relates to how long dental practices, can only perform emergency work. And so each state's going to see a different trajectory once, whenever, when and if those orders are lifted. So, I mean, it's staggering. And so when I talk about, that 7 to 10 day period, you can see that, the vast majority, basically comparing, March 2020 to 2019, the kind of we hit the cliff, if you will, or fell off the
Yeah.
cliff, really.
Right.
Revenues down by 76%. So it's the vast majority of labs, are there. And I think what we all want to know, everybody in the supply chain, dentist, manufacturers, vendors like Whitmix, and certainly the labs, the issue is how long, what's the duration of time when we get to some normalcy, and how long can people ride that out in terms of cash flow and stuff like that. So
What a just a horrific time we're in. So here's the question, and your information begs this question, and it's one that I don't even really want to ask, but do you think that there will be some labs that won't reopen, that will not make it through this crisis?
yeah, I mean, everybody's trying to use history as a guide, and that's what you should do. Things, other recessions that we've been through, and certainly some labs have been around 40, 50 years in some cases, and certainly have
Yeah.
seen different, dips and downturns. So, and many of them made it through those. This one, I think everybody understands and visualizes this. This one is different. I think the duration and the universal impact of this one is clearly different. And I think the issue of, if we continue to watch not only the kind of the healthcare community talk about what life looks like in August, September, and will we have a second wave, if you will, going
Yeah,
into the fourth
exactly.
quarter and first quarter next year. I think the issue comes down to the tail of this is much different than probably what we've seen historically with other, certainly recessions or even depression, that type of environment. So I think that's the issue. Is, unfortunately, I think the answer is yes. Some labs won't make it. I mean, for that matter, some dentists probably won't make it. So some
Right.
suppliers may not make it. There's nobody immune, and in this kind of situation, I think there's nobody immune in the sense of, what type of cash flow that they had going into this. What did they have in terms of any reserves or assets on their balance sheet? And then certainly, as the government, both state and federal programs continue to potentially be expanded, are those programs enough of a lifeline to allow people to buy time? And I think that's the issue. Is, even I was looking at a report this morning from there's a magazine called Chief Executive, which is a CEO business magazine, and which are predominantly bigger companies, but even them, in terms of that sample size, we're saying, how many of those companies will make it, 3 to 6 months? How many could make it 6 to 12 months with this kind of duration of, either full closure or, lower production comparatively to normal years? And so, I think I was on a panel yesterday with a few folks, like Nelson Rago and Laura Kelly were on that panel, Kelly Carr, just talking about, it's a mixed bag, meaning the smaller lab potentially may be able to weather this because their overhead's less, they've got less, personnel cost going into this and coming out of it. But again, in that sense, what's their customer mix? When do those people start to see patients come back in the chair? And and then also, payment terms. What is the turnaround in terms of, you start to do cases again, but are you going to get paid in 60, 90 days as opposed to 30-day net? And what are those payment expectations? And
Right.
so all labs, regardless of size and business model, are going to have very open communication with their customer base about where they are. Everybody rides this wave together, and vendor partners as well. And so I think this is a very resilient community, and a very collaborative community, which is the good news. But it's open communication, transparent communication amongst all the players, if you will, is going to have to occur so that everybody gets out of it in a successful manner.
So speaking of communication, how is that between you and the organization, NADL, and Washington? Are there bills in lawmakers' hands now that could impact us in the very near future?
Sure. I mean, it's we being at NADL, pretty much daily communication with the American Dental Association, both with their Chicago main office staff, but in this particular situation, primarily with their government affairs staff, which is in DC. NADL, we have a DC law firm, Polsinelli law firm, which also has a lobbying unit, but majority of what we're doing with them is primarily on the legal analysis of things as they're coming forward. And so, most of these programs are universal, at least as it relates to small business relief. There's not necessarily specific things to dentistry, although probably shortly we'll be publishing some stuff relative to some interpretation on some of the relief acts as it relates to sick leave, which was that Families First Act, which was the first package. And we believe, based on our legal analysis now, that dental labs would meet the criteria as a healthcare provider under that Families First Act, and which from an employer standpoint is good news, because those most labs weren't subject to the Family Medical Leave Act pre-COVID, and that was a new kind of expense, if you will, that labs under 50 people were definitely not prepared for. So we'll be publishing something like that around that shortly. And reality is that was effectively 3 weeks ago, and it's just now come out within the last 24 hours in terms of some updates from the Department of Labor to actually be able to make that determination. So we've had people make decisions over the last 3 weeks to comply, because that's the way it was originally drafted, and now the new guidance is saying we believe we've got a legal argument that they don't have to comply with that particular provision. So the point of the matter is, whether it's that type of example or the economic relief packages, stuff continues to change on a daily basis. And so
of course.
that's the biggest thing, is we've been encouraging people to build an advisory team if they didn't have one already. I mean, most labs or small businesses, they have a relationship with a CPA, they have a relationship with a banker, sometimes a law firm. It's rare, I think, for businesses to convene those people as a group. These are the situations where you convene them as a group so that they're all on the same page.
Yes, makes sense.
When you go through just the massive application in terms of the volume of applications that are going through for these SBA relief packages, and the bankers and the CPAs are working through it hour by hour, day by day to work through the guidance. This is not the time for business owners to kind of wing it and say, oh, I'm going to try to do this by myself. Use the tools, use the resources and partnerships that you have. I guess that's one of the biggest things I could say in terms of communication. Utilize the resources you have, and don't try to wing it, because this is not the time to do that. It's too complex. It's too complex, and it's too fast moving to try to kind of do your own analysis and get something that you can hang your hat on.
Yeah, a lot of information there. That's great. You know, at some point this will end, of course, and we will get back to whatever the new normal will be. So when we do, you've already addressed some of this, but how do you think it will change the lab business? I mean, I know internally within the lab there'll be collections considerations and and employee considerations, but in a general sense, how do you think it will change a lab? And what strategies would you say should be put in place for planning that the lab needs to consider post COVID-19?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say from a NADL perspective, during the month of April, the last few webinars that NADL has had have been very laser focused on particular topics. So SBA relief issues, and then we did one on infection control protocols,
Hmm.
pre-COVID and post-COVID. We did one on labs that are doing 3D printing of personal protective equipment. So, so we've been very laser focused on key topics. We're going to do in April or the remainder of April strategy webinars. So to your question, our concern from an end of deal perspective is, and I think manufacturers have this concern as well, is naturally lab owners are focused on today. I mean, they're just literally trying to keep the doors open
Yeah,
and keep the lights on to get to the other side. Our concern is, if they walk in 4 to 6 weeks from now and say, let's just start doing what we were doing before, that's probably not going to be a successful model. So we're going to do some strategy sessions, really high level kind of thought processes about what does the customer relationship look like going forward? What does your vendor partner relationship look like going forward? And how do you have to look at those relationships and the communication elements of those relationships differently? We're all, it's interdependent. So, if we look pre-COVID, labs that were successful before had very high levels of communication with their clients, whether they were local customers or mail order customers, but high level of communication, and set expectations and clear expectations. So I think in this particular circumstance, again, labs that one component of success will be labs helping their dental customers as much as possible to illustrate to the patients that particular practice is a safe place to go back to, and what is the
yeah,
dental lab doing to ensure that, what is the practice doing to ensure that. It's all about getting patients back in the chair, and labs and dental offices probably can really collaborate on the messaging around that, and so I think that'll be a key component, and
yeah,
certainly also with the vendor relationships too. Just again, I think transparency is key, so that everybody knows what is affecting that particular dental laboratory business and what their needs are. And Larry Weiss was on the phone yesterday with me and used the term over communicate, and I think that's the best way to put it. Is this is not the time to go on radio silence. Just over communicate, communicate clearly and with transparency, and as long as that is maintained, we'll be able to turn this around quicker, as everybody's on the same page.
yeah. You know, you mentioned infection control in the beginning of your answer, and I have a feeling that's going to be bigger than we even imagine now, and certainly
Yeah,
bigger than it has been historically.
sure, sure.
But there's I can't even imagine what a patient must be worried about. But certainly lab technicians who get conventional impressions that are bloody and infected and all that, I think will lead to a faster growth, and I don't know this, but a faster growth of digital
Yep,
impressioning, et
yep.
cetera. And I think that will become a more permanent part of our future. Have you heard anything
Yeah,
like that?
I think most people would agree with you with that. I mean, it's not to say that the traditional methods still won't occur, but the protocols to ensure the safety for everybody, patient included. I think we all, in many cases, took infection control protocols for granted, and we've all kind of either cut corners or said, this is really not that important. And I think clearly we all know now how important it actually is.
Very much so.
But to your point, I think there's that communication issue of what are the barriers that will could prevent us from getting back to full production, both at the clinical side and the laboratory side, and that potentially can be a bottleneck, just because there's so many elements of touch points, both incoming and outgoing. And to your point, if you do the digital workflow, you just took a whole lot of steps out of the equation in terms of consumer confidence, if you will, or consumer concerns, but also for the clinical staff and the laboratory staff. So I definitely think it probably will speed that process up in terms of full integration, because it's just from a quality assurance standpoint, takes a lot of variables out of the equation.
Well, you're absolutely right. We could go on, and I would love to, but I think because of the nature of this kind of program, which will be primarily social media oriented, we probably should stop for now and maybe have a second part of this as things change as we go forward. So I'd like to thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is a very busy day for you. You told me that you had 9 of these programs this week alone, which is pretty amazing. So I thank you for doing one for Whitmix. And by the way, I should also say that I love the way dental laboratories and dental product manufacturers have stepped up and started making these PPEs. Whitmix is, as you know, we sell and manufacture printers and printing materials. So as a result, we now have changed our production model. So we are making masks and face shields and that kind of thing for local hospitals and all that. So I'm proud of the company for that reason. So
absolutely.
Thank you again, Bennett. We really appreciate it, and I will be in touch with you sometime soon.
Thank you, Bernie. Thanks to the Whitmix team, and our best to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay healthy, everyone. Bye.